said, "Are you sure?"
I don't believe you, Father.
Yeah, that's from Sweden. It's like huge Viking skillets. He's really tall.
Oh, my dad just had an authentic cowhide leather belt.
Oh, wow.
That'll work on Billy John's job.
Interesting. Some people get really mad at me when I say this, but I was only spanked twice in my life. That was it. I don't remember either of them.
Right.
I was really young. First time, like, Mom said I got mad and I ran outside and went to the middle of the road and sat down. Just in protest. I was like 3 years old or something, and I got spanked for that one. The other one was also from Mom. Whenever she was outside washing the car or something, I got a hold of the hose and just started spraying her in the face. And every time she'd come close to me, I'd just spray her again. Like, I just kept doing that. So, but I always had the fear of my mom and my dad, like that they would, you know. So I think instilling it early is helpful. But every kid's so different too. It just, you know, discipline of children there's no cookie cutter approach. Just like with people, you know, you have to, you know, in Ephesians 6, talks about fathers don't provoke your children unto wrath, unto anger, and there's 1,000 different ways in which you can do that. You know, it doesn't specify, like, you know, don't yell at them too hard. It just says don't provoke them to anger or don't provoke them to wrath, which means it's not that you don't. I mean, my kids don't like it and they're angry in the moment when I discipline them, but the idea is that you're provoking them, you're pushing them towards being a wrathful, angry person. So that could be just like detrimentally tearing them down constantly. You know, that could be a way that you provoke them to wrath, or that you don't discipline them at all. You know, that's what happened with David's son, Absalom. It says that he never told him no. So Absalom's like, Dad's getting old. I'm just going to take this for myself. And then that's when he revolts against, you know what I'm saying? So, anyways, that calls for discernment with people, whether you're parenting or pastoring or at a kids camp, you know, in the summer and trying to figure out, like, this kid's acting a fool, how do I deal with them? You know, a public shaming could be their complete undoing. You know, they may need to be taken to the side, or that might not, you know, it's just figuring out people and not just throwing out, you know, hateful, slanderous, mean discipline, when really it's not discipline at that, because all discipline has to come from a place of love and not just wrath. That's the difference between discipline and punishment, you know. So, speaking of which, I want to back up a little bit and go to Isaiah 6. So if you'll back up with me, go over there. Okay, cool, good. Great. We're on schedule. We're doing well. All right, so I want to kind of, I don't know how far we'll get into this passage, but I did want to give you a little bit of, this will help us with context. So sometimes you read names and you're like, that sounds familiar and I think I remember it, but understanding the context of what goes behind these names is going to be important for the whole story of Isaiah, the whole prophecy. So verse 1, chapter 6 says, In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne. Now I want to think about this King Uzziah first, and just why this was such a pivotal shift for Isaiah and Judah in particular, the whole nation. Because Uzziah, his reign was a long, like 52 years. He reigned for 52 years. From the time he was 16.
That's pretty good.
Which is remarkable. When most of these guys, they might go for like a year, then they're assassinated. He for 52 years, and there was more prospering. There under his reign was the most prospering of Judah since Solomon. So it was a very prosperous time. But whenever he died, it was like this moment of what's going to happen. What's the new ruler going to be like? Are we going to continue to do well, or are we going down a bad path? And it was a scary time for the nation. But that's when Isaiah has this vision of like the year he died. That was such a pivotal shift for the nation. Scary times. He just sees the Lord enthroned, sitting on a throne, high and lifted up, the train of his robe filling the temple, which gives us a clear picture that like even when good kings die, our true king still lives. Don't put your hope in man. It's a great lesson for us just looking at that. But let's look at Uzziah a little bit. Once you turn back to 2 Chronicles chapter 26 and read up on him. 2 Chronicles 26. Oh, okay. No wonder. I was in 1 Chronicles. Look. That's not. There it is. 2 Chronicles 26. So after Amaziah dies, which he was a bad king at the end because he wouldn't listen to the Lord and had a conspiracy set up against him, all this different stuff. All the people, verse 1, chapter 26 says that all the people took Judah took Uzziah, who was 16 years old at the time, and made him king instead of his father Amaziah. He built Eloth and he restored it to Judah after the king slept with his father. After the king slept with his fathers, Uzziah was 16 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 52 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Jecoliah, fun name of Jerusalem, and it says that he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that his father Amaziah had done. Which Amaziah, if you remember, didn't finish well. He did very badly in the end, but it says that he set himself, and this is important to see in verse 5. It says that he set himself to seek God in the days of Zechariah, who instructed him in the fear of the Lord. And as long as he sought the Lord, God made him prosper. And there's some a little bit of poetic foreshadowing there. As long as he sought the Lord, he prospered, which implies that later on he's going to stop seeking the Lord and he's not going to prosper. Pay attention. He says that he set himself to seek God in the days of Zechariah, who was instructing him in the fear of the Lord. There was another king that kind of happened this as well, who, as long as he had an instructor, an influencer in his life, he was doing well. But as soon as he had that guy out of his life, he turns. And it doesn't say what happened to Zechariah. It just says that he sought him in the days of Zechariah because Zechariah was instructing him, influencing him. But once that influence is gone, Uzziah won't seek the Lord. Now, pay attention to what happens next. He says that he went out, made war against the Philistines, broke through the wall of Gath. Verse 7, God helped him against the Philistines. The Ammonites, verse 8, paid tribute to Uzziah, and his fame spread even to the border of Egypt, for he was very strong. Moreover, he built towers in Jerusalem. Now, this is after they had they'd had a rough patch. They had been given over to a couple of their enemies. A lot of people had died, but now they're in this time of prospering financially, economically, but also in a military strength, because verse 13 says that under their command they had an army of 307,500 who could make war with mighty power to help the king against the enemy. And Uzziah prepared for all the army shields, spears, helmets, coats of mail, bows, and stones for slinging. In Jerusalem he made machines invented by skillful men to be on the towers in the corners, to shoot arrows and great stones. That's kind of that picture of the catapults, That
was about the time of ballistas and trebuchets.
Yeah, so he was involved in the inventing of those things. Pretty awesome. And it says that his fame spread far, for he was marvelously helped till what? What's that into that, verse 15? He was marvelously helped
Till he became strong.
till he became strong. Now this starts showing the pride that he has, because in the beginning he's this 16-year-old kid who he seeks himself, or he's seeking the Lord. He's seeking the Lord's help, and as long as he's seeking the Lord, he's prospering. But then he became strong. It's this forgetting where you came from and who it is that's empowering you. He starts thinking, man, look what I've done. Look what I've accomplished. And he becomes strong within himself. Pride. Prosperity leads to pride, and it's going to lead to his destruction. Verse 16 says that because when he was strong, he grew proud to his destruction. Pride from the prosperity given to him rather than humility. Because prosperity, let me say this, and don't think that I'm advocating for the prosperity gospel, but prosperity is not a wicked thing in that of itself. It's what we do with it. You know, if the Lord prospers us, prospers our business, prospers our finances, prospers our fields, we have two options. Either we become humble in recognizing that I don't deserve this, and that humility leads us into servanthood of sharing what we have with others. That's good. You know, and there's been plenty of good men who happen to also, good godly men who also happen to be rich. But they weren't strong within themselves, and they weren't just trying to keep it all for themselves either. You know, I think that's important to remember, especially in our day and age, because we think, especially when people say like, well, yeah, you know, money's the root of all evil. And I said, well, it's actually the love of money that is the root of all kinds of evil. It's what 1 Timothy 6:10 says. Money is not the root of all evil. It says the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. It's the love, it's the desire, because of what money represents. It represents power and prestige and prominence, and it gives you pleasure, right? All of those things is what money represents. So that love, that desire for it, it's not having it, it's the desire for it that's the sin. It's the love of it, it's the serving of it that becomes sinful and idolatrous and destructive. So when he's prospered, when Uzziah's prospered, it's not a bad thing. The Lord's prospering, but what he does with it is that he becomes proud to his destruction. And it says that he was unfaithful to the Lord his God, and he entered the temple of the Lord to burn incense on the altar of incense. Is this his job? This is not his place. And then there's this priest. I love this. Azariah. It's my second son's name. Azariah. It means the Lord helps, ironically.
Azariah.
Azariah means the Lord will help. Now it's very interesting because Uzziah had been helped by the Lord, and now he became strong, but then Azariah, his name means the Lord will help. Lord will do it. And but Azariah, the priest, marches in after him. He goes, like, you know, this is, I mean, it's the king. He can have your head cut off, you know? And he's like, what are you doing? The most powerful man in Jerusalem, what are you doing? This is not for you, he says. He says he went in after him with 80 priests of the Lord who were men of valor. Like 80 of them come in. They withstood King Uzziah, and they said to him, it's not for you, Uzziah. They didn't even say king. It's not for you, Uzziah, to burn incense to the Lord, but for the priests, the sons of Aaron, who are consecrated to burn to the Lord. Go out of the sanctuary, for you have done wrong, and it will bring you no honor from the Lord God. Then Uzziah was angry.
I found that interesting.
Yeah?
He wasn't punished until after he became angry. So I was wondering, was God giving him a little bit of a chance to...
I think there's an opportunity of like humbling here. But he doesn't. He gets angry. Now, he had a censer in his hand to burn incense, and when he became angry with the priests, leprosy breaks out on his forehead in the presence of the priests in the house of the Lord by the altar of incense. And Azariah and the chief priests and all the priests looked at him, behold, he was leprous. And they rushed him out. They get him out quickly, and he's also like, whoa. It says that he rushed himself out to go out quickly as well, because he recognizes in that moment, like, I went too far. Whoops, this is bad. He goes out because the Lord had struck him. And King Uzziah was a leper to the day of his death. And being a leper, he lived in a separate house, for he was excluded from the house of the Lord. Now, he had been a great king up to this point, but whenever he became prosperous, he became proud, and it was his destruction. So that's Uzziah. That there's this hope that this is going to be a good king, that he's going to turn things around, and then he becomes proud and destroys it. So his death, though, brings an end to the prosperous reign of Judah, and it marks the future with just great uncertainty. And that's the time in which, after he dies, that's when Isaiah gets the vision of the Lord. And Isaiah, we talked a little bit last week, perhaps, on this. This is one of the most quoted passages in Isaiah. Like, probably Isaiah 6 and Isaiah 53 are probably the two most known passages, or preached passages at least, from the book of Isaiah. So I'd be remiss to skip over it. But I wanted you to see that context from those first couple words in the year that King Uzziah died. So he's dead, but the Lord continues to reign, high and lifted up, and he is holy. This king is holy, holy, holy. He's not leprous. He's not sinful. He hasn't acted stupidly. He is in complete control. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. Smoke's always this picture of like divine presence in the Old Testament. And Isaiah says, woe is me, pronounces a curse on himself, for I am lost. I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. Now this was, in the Old Testament, seeing the Lord brought about death because of sinfulness. And that's always the mindset, but there's multitudes of people who saw the Lord and didn't die. Who saw the glory of the Lord at the very least. They didn't see him in his fullness, but they saw a vision of him, but they didn't die, even though that was what was to happen in seeing the Lord because of their sinfulness. And the problem here is he says, I am sinful and I've seen the Lord, I'm dead. He says, woe is me, I'm dead. And that's what all of them do. That's what John does in Revelation chapter 1 whenever he sees the glorious Christ. He falls down as though dead. That's that response that we talked about in the worship class to his revelation of like, I am undeserving. There's nobody who walks into God's presence and says, hey, what's up? How you doing? There is an awe, a reverence, a breaking of self, of recognizing his glory and my unglory. So one of the seraphim fly in. He says he gets a burning coal from the altar and touches the mouth of Isaiah and says, behold, this is touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for. Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah, well, I do blacksmithing. And so I don't know if you've ever tried to go near a burning coal, but you can't even get your face within 2.5 feet of the forge without singeing off your beard hair.
Yeah.
It's toasty.
So what does that teach us then about the effects of sin being taken away? It's painful. You know, there's this searing effect that like he says, I'm a people of unclean lips. He's like, I'll take care of that. Zing. Yeah, I got that for you. No worries. Yeah, you are kind of filthy in your lip area. Let me singe that off. Yeah. No, it's that, and it is. I mean, why would he say I'm a people of unclean lips? Why would he go there automatically?
So our mouths speak where our hearts.
Very good. Our mouths speak from the hearts. You know, the heart's the real problem, but the mouth is where the uncleanness comes out at. You know, it's not. And Jesus said it's like out of the heart proceed what's true. You know, the issues of the heart is what he talks about, but it comes out of the mouth. James talks about the tongue being this instrument that's set on fire from hell. You know. And if anybody can bridle his own tongue, he's a perfect man. That's what James says. So yeah, our mouths are what cause blasphemies and treasons and things like that. So it is interesting that that's what he goes to whenever he sees the Lord. Is like, I got dirty lips, you know, because that's what's issuing forth from his heart, and that's what's singed and cleansed for him. But what I want you to pay attention to was the calling, you know, because Isaiah sees the vision of the Lord and he understands his sin is atoned for. And then he hears the Lord speaking, saying, whom shall I send? Who shall go for us? And he says, here I am. And he says, go and say to this people, keep on hearing, but don't understand. Keep on seeing, but don't perceive. Make the heart of this people dull, and their ears heavy, and blind their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn and be healed. That sounds fun. Great, grand ministry, right?
Boy, I'm sending you out to do this, but I'm going to make it difficult for you to do
Yeah, okay. Oh, and that's why, I mean, it's usually a good idea to ask, what's the job? You know? But Isaiah doesn't need to ask what the job is, what the ministry is, what the calling is. Why? Because he's seen the glory of the Lord. And that's what catapults us and keeps us going in this Christian walk, and especially in Christian ministry. It's like if you're depending upon success to be what keeps you driven and going in ministry, then you will go to something else eventually. You'll either leave the ministry or the ministry will leave you. And what I mean by the ministry leaving you is that you become calloused, cold, robotic within your exposition of Scripture. You'll just do things to keep your job, you know. And usually what happens too is that I see this with pastors all the time and people in ministry, is that they start turning to other things for satisfaction. There's a guy down in South Carolina, one of the biggest churches in America, a couple of years ago that I'll spare names, but you know he had done really well for himself, ministerially speaking, right? I mean, thousands of people, a couple of different campuses, probably 20,000 people coming to his main church campus, and then it comes out that he's got a really bad alcohol problem. You know, he's successful, but he falls into this trap. Another guy, I'll tell you his name, because you probably won't remember it anyways. Tullian Tchividjian. He's actually, I think, one of the great grandsons of Billy Graham, and he's connected to Presbyterianism. He was at Coral Ridge Presbyterian Church down in Florida. That was D. James Kennedy's church way back in the day, which D. James Kennedy started Knox Theological Seminary, which is where I got my master's degree. Long story short, Tullian Tchividjian was the pastor there, doing great. I mean, he was becoming a celebrity pastor pretty quick, and then, you know, turns out his wife cheated on him. He cheated back on her, and then he's out of the ministry. You know.
Yeah, that'd do it.
There's this progression, and that the point is. That if you're looking to success as your glory, as your gain, as what keeps you going, then you'll eventually, like, it won't be enough. You know, if the Lord is not the vision and the purpose and the goal and the aim of your ministry and your life, then you'll turn to something else. The ministry, you'll either leave the ministry, you're like, I'm done with this, or the ministry, like in these guys' cases, will leave you. You know? So success in a worldly way of speaking is not what is to keep you. You know, and that's why I love reading the prophets. Because they, in worldly, evangelical 21st century terms, they were not successful. You know? Go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yeah, dude.
Okay.
Go.
Well, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. Like, you're talking about, like I've struggled with substance abuse heavily. And there's just, 1,000's not enough. I mean, literally. I mean, the amount of alcohol that I would drink in one, I mean, like, 30 pack of beer, go, see how fast you can drink.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and so it's like, trying to come out of that it's almost, there was a reference, and I don't know which one it was, but it's like if you were going, say you were going to the Biltmore, okay, and it's like this majestic, big, huge mansion. It's like, oh, and then like you got people, and said something similar to this out front, like somebody out front selling postcards and whatnots, whatever, and you get caught up with that and miss what's the majestic view of the mansion,
right?
And it's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of what, when God does not become the focal point of our lives, how we can, in such a lesser God.
Yeah.
I mean, to like idolatry, I mean, you realize I've succumbed to the idolatry of such a God.
Yeah.
Just a little, in comparison to what, the Lord of Hosts is, and and so I think that, like, in substance abuse, you can't tell somebody, well, don't drink anymore. I mean, you can, and you should. I mean, and obviously if they're somewhere, they probably know that already. But showing them what they're missing. That's
exactly it. When we live in a religious system of just stop doing this. Yeah. Like, all we do is turn them from one sin to the next. Right. They'll find something to fill in that gap. The issue, and if you think about the nature of temptation for a minute, there are certain things that I'm not tempted with. I'm not trying to be gross. I'm not tempted with wanting to kiss a dude. Right. For instance, that's not something that I like. He's pretty. Like, I don't think of it, but I know other guys that are Christians who have struggled with homosexual thoughts. I don't, but they have. I've struggled with lust. I've struggled with pride. These are all things that I have been and will be till the day I die tempted with. Why? Because temptation comes from desire. If you think about people that struggle with pornography for a minute, like, what are they looking for? What are they desiring? They're desiring satisfaction, pleasure.
You're never gonna get it.
Never from that. That's a bottomless pit. Does God intend to give them satisfaction and pleasure in life?
Yes.
Yeah. Just not that way. That's the nature of temptation. It's not that God does not intend these things for you. He just does not intend them for you this way. Right. And that's the nature of temptation. Same with, you mentioned alcohol. So, like, what is it that draws us to alcohol or drug abuse? Well, nobody ever goes into it, man, I just want to abuse drugs, or I just want to abuse alcohol. You don't go into it intending that. But it enslaves you. It grabs you. But you want more and more, and all of a sudden you don't own it; it owns you. That's the nature of addiction. But what it is that draws us to that is this picture of joy and peace and like relaxation, right? And that's why Paul says, don't be drunk but with wine, but filled with the Spirit. Why does he make that connection? Don't be drunk with wine, but filled with the Spirit. Why do people drink?
To be intoxicated or to feel good.
All right, so joy, right?
Yeah.
So you want joy?
To be at peace, you forget about your problems.
All right, I want joy. I want peace. You ever heard of it used in the term of like liquid courage?
Yes, you're 10 foot tall and bulletproof.
I'm now I have courage. So he says, don't be drunk with wine because you're looking for joy, looking for peace, you're looking for courage. But be filled with the Spirit. What does the Spirit give you?
All those.
Joy, peace, courage. That's why he makes that connection, right? And I think that's why we do have to show people the better nature of what is it that you're really seeking here. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be found in this. It's only going to be found here within him, you know.
I guess I heard it mention that you're looking for all of the good things without putting in any of the work.
Yeah. Sin is taking things that God has designed for you and intended for you, but taking it out of his will, taking it out of his time, doing it your own way. All the way back to the Garden of Eden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, this is where I get this. Solomon. Now, he said, don't eat the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The day you eat it, you'll surely die. Right? That's what he told Adam and Eve. Don't eat of that yourself. Now, I implied the self. Don't eat it yourself. Notice I said that. Solomon has a vision, has a dream of the Lord. And the Lord comes to him and says, ask of me anything you want, I'll give it to you. You know what Solomon asked for?
Wisdom.
Literally, knowledge of good and evil, to know how to, and this wisdom to know how to govern your people. And God was pleased to give it to him. He asked for the very same thing they took. Which implies this: did God intend for Adam and Eve to eventually know what good and evil was? Mm-hmm. Be pretty obvious, or at least good, and knowledge. He doesn't want them to, he didn't intend for them to just be stupid and walk around, fruit, dog, naming the animals. He wanted to give them knowledge, right? But giving it to them in his timing by walking with him. Because remember it says that they walk with him during the cool of the day? I think that's the moments in which he intends to give his children wisdom there. But they took it in their time, right? In their way, and it's sin. So anything that you're tempted with, there is an intention on God's end to give that to you in his good timing. Sex is the same way. Does God intend? Yeah, but within his covenant community, his covenant thing called marriage that he created for our good, for the life of the world, really, in that sense. He intends that for you. Joy, feasting, even. All of these things he does intend for us. He doesn't withhold anything good from us. Forever, at least. There are things that he's not giving us now that he will give us later. But he won't hold it back. He intends to give it to us in his good timing. And that's going to be for our best, for our good, So, where are we at? Isaiah 6.
Yeah, good question.
Isaiah 6, the whole point of it is if God would have just said, okay, Isaiah, I want you to go and preach a really hard message to this people, and they're not going to listen to a word you say. I don't think that's something that he would be like, yeah, I'd like to sign up for that, But once he's seen the full vision of God's glory seated and enthroned, I'll do whatever. That's what keeps him going in the hard days of ministry ahead. The vision of God in his fullness, and that's what will keep you and I going as well. It's not success in ministry. It's not success in worldly speaking terms. It's not satisfaction of you doing a good job. It's God's glory in its fullness that will keep you going and satisfied and focused and set upon him. So I just want you to see that from him. I think that's an important thing to recognize whenever he says, yeah, who, because I hear this preached all the time, like, who shall go? Who are we going to send? Oh, here I am, send me. And like, that's this big missionary chant for people. And then you don't, and we have these really big pie in the sky ideas of what ministry missions will look like. And then when it doesn't become that, like, man, it stinks, Read some good biographies of missionaries, like John Patton or Adoniram Judson, or these people who felt it in their bones. I have to go to these unreached nations. John Patton in the Great Hebrides Islands, he would lose both of these guys, him and Adoniram Judson too. Like, the places they went were unreached people groups, and for Patton, there was like, he was going to a cannibalistic tribe. And everybody told him beforehand, like, dude, they're going to eat you. They will eat you alive. And he said, okay. And he goes, and he didn't have any converts for like the first 6 years of his ministry. Huh?
Did they eat?
No, they didn't.
Okay.
They did not. They ended up, after a long ministry, and he didn't even see really the fruits of his initial labors. Like, he finally started getting some converts, but those converts would be the ones who would really bring about the fruit there. And now Burma, that's what it's called now, that we know it as, is a predominantly Christian nation. That's you don't know what the Lord will do with Satan's arrows. He redirects them how he purposes. And but what kept Patton going, what kept Judson going, what kept all these guys going when the going get tough, was the glory of God. Put your eye on anything else and you'll fall. You'll fail, you'll quit, you'll go do something else. But get that glimpse that we have in fullness now, that Isaiah would have traded this for. We have that. So keep your eyes focused there. I didn't get to Ahaz. Maybe next week we'll get to Ahaz, okay? Sound good?
Ahaz was the fun one who sacrificed his children, right?
Yep.
Cool.
Yeah. So we'll talk about the Valley of Hinnom and sacrifice to Molech and all that stuff. All right, Lydia, hope you heard everything good. Let me know if you have any questions.